Clara Jensen pressed her forehead to the cool glass of the airport window, watching the lights of Abu Dhabi blur against the darkness. Behind her, the terminal buzzed with voices in languages she didn't understand, but for once she didn't care. She had left behind the greyness of her small apartment in Copenhagen, the long shifts at a job that paid just enough to survive, and the silence of evenings that stretched endlessly. For weeks she had replayed Rashid's words on her phone. "Come, Clara. You deserve something beautiful. I'll show you the desert, the stars, a place where the world finally feels alive." Her heart beat faster as she scrolled back through their messages. His sentences warm, confident, laced with promises of romance that felt intoxicating. He wasn't like the men she had known, boys who offered half-hearted dates, men who left her wondering why she was never enough. Rashid had made her feel chosen. She tugged her jacket tighter, scanning the arrival gate. He was easy to spot, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a crisp white shirt and tailored trousers that set him apart from the crowd. His presence seemed to draw eyes, but his gaze was fixed only on her. When he smiled, she felt both relief and a sudden, disorienting shiver. "Clara," he said, his voice smooth as he took her suitcase effortlessly. "You are even more beautiful in person." Heat rose to her cheeks. "It feels unreal," she admitted, "like I've stepped out of my life into someone else's." "Good," he replied, his hand brushing hers briefly. "That's exactly what I wanted for you." They walked together through the terminal, his stride purposeful, hers quick to keep pace. Outside, the air was heavy, thick with desert warmth that clung to her skin. Parked at the curb was a sleek black car, gleaming under the floodlights. A driver in a dark suit opened the door for her with a bow. Clara hesitated only a moment, the weight of secrecy pressing against her chest. None of her friends knew she was here. She had told them she was traveling for work, unwilling to share details of a romance that felt too fragile, too unbelievable to survive their doubts. She remembered her best friend Anna's warning before she left. "Strangers online only tell you what you want to hear." Clara had laughed it off, but the words echoed now, faint and persistent. She glanced at Rashid. He stood with casual confidence, hands clasped behind his back, watching her with a steady calm that felt almost rehearsed. "You'll love the desert," he said softly. "There the world belongs only to us. No noise, no interruptions." The way he said it, so final, so certain, sent a ripple through her. She swallowed, pushing the unease aside. This was what she had wanted. Escape, freedom, the chance to feel alive again. "Then let's go," she whispered, forcing a smile. Rashid's lips curved faintly as he guided her toward the car. The driver shut the door behind them, sealing her inside. Clara sank into the leather seat, her pulse quickening. As the vehicle pulled away from the airport, the city lights shrank in the rearview mirror, swallowed slowly by the dark horizon. She leaned back, her fingers twisting together in her lap. Excitement fluttered inside her, bright and urgent, yet beneath it, a knot of unease tightened. She told herself it was only nerves, only the shock of stepping into something so new. Still, as the sleek car carried her farther into the unknown, the silence between her and Rashid felt heavier than she expected. Outside, the road stretched endlessly toward the desert, where shadows waited beneath the stars. The car wound deeper into the desert, the city fading into a faint glow on the horizon. Sand stretched endlessly on both sides, rippling like an ocean frozen in time. Clara pressed her face to the window, transfixed by the vast emptiness. There was beauty in it, but also something merciless. At last, lanterns appeared in the distance, scattered across the dunes like fallen stars. The car slowed, tires crunching against sand, and a cluster of canvas tents rose into view. They were not the ragged kind she had imagined, but opulent, lined with golden fabric, carpets spread across the ground, cushions piled high. A low fire burned at the center, throwing sparks into the night sky. Rashid stepped out first, extending his hand. She hesitated only a moment before placing hers in his. The desert air was cooler now, fragrant with spices drifting from platters of food laid out on an ornate table. She caught her breath. It felt less like camping and more like stepping into a private kingdom. "Do you like it?" Rashid asked, watching her face closely. It's Incredible, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Good. Everything here is yours, Clara. For as long as you're with me, nothing will ever be missing. The promise made her chest tighten. For a while, she let herself believe it. They dined beneath the stars, grilled lamb, sweet dates, fragrant rice, food she had never tasted before. Rashid poured wine into her glass, though he barely touched his own. He kept his gaze fixed on her, steady and unreadable, as if memorizing every flicker of her expression. She laughed once, nervously, when he teased her about the way she fumbled with her fork. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You don't need to be nervous. Out here, no one is watching. It's only us. The way he said it felt both comforting and unsettling. Clara forced a smile, willing herself to relax. She wanted to believe in this fantasy, to silence the cautious voice inside her that whispered warnings. Later, they reclined on silk cushions near the fire. The night was impossibly still, broken only by the crackle of flames and the sweep of wind across the dunes. Clara tilted her head back, staring at constellations she didn't know the names of. Beautiful, she murmured. Yes, Rashid replied, but his eyes were not on the sky. She turned to him, startled by the intensity in his gaze. For a moment she saw something raw there, longing perhaps, or possession. His hand brushed her cheek, lingering too long, and his smile faltered. Promise me something, he said quietly. What? That you won't let anyone come between us. Not your friends, not your doubts, nothing. The sudden demand pressed against her chest like a weight. Rashid, say it. She froze, searching his face. His tone was gentle, almost tender, yet beneath it pulsed a sharpness she hadn't felt before. Her throat tightened. I promise, she whispered. His expression softened instantly, his fingers threading through hers. Good, now you belong to me. The words clung to her skin like the desert wind, both caress and chain. Clara leaned back, heart racing, trying to steady her breath. Above them, the stars glittered cold and endless. When Rashid finally rose, he extinguished the fire with a single kick of sand. Darkness swallowed the camp, except for the faint lantern glow inside the tent. He extended his hand again, his silhouette tall against the dune. Come, he said, his voice low. It's time to rest. Clara followed, though her steps faltered. Excitement still lingered, but unease threaded itself deeper now, a quiet current beneath the night's beauty. As the tent closed behind them, the desert wind howled softly outside, carrying with it a warning she could not yet name. Morning light seeped through the fabric of the tent, turning gold against the folds. Clara stirred awake, the air heavy with silence. Rashid was already outside. She could hear his voice in the distance, low and clipped, speaking rapidly in Arabic to someone she could not see. She rose, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, and stepped outside. The desert stretched endlessly, pale under the rising sun. Rashid stood a few yards away, phone pressed to his ear. When he noticed her, he ended the call abruptly, slipping the phone into his pocket. His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. You should have stayed in bed, he said, walking toward her. You need your rest. I couldn't sleep, Clara admitted, forcing a light tone. It's so quiet here. Quiet as peace, he replied, though his hand lingered on her arm a moment too firmly. They spent the morning walking across the dunes, Rashid pointing out desert flowers and ancient carvings etched into stone. He was attentive, but there was a tension beneath his gestures, as if each smile cost him effort. Clara tried to match his mood, but unease coiled tighter in her chest. By midday, they returned to the camp. Clara reached for her phone, instinctively wanting to check messages. Rashid's hand shot out, snatching it before she could unlock it. You don't need this, he said softly, but his grip was iron. Her stomach dropped. It's just my friends will worry if I don't. You told no one, remember? His eyes hardened. You came here for me, not for them. She nodded quickly, her pulse racing. He returned the phone to his pocket, as though settling a matter already decided. The rest of the day unfolded with forced cheer. Rashid tried to resume his charm, telling stories, pouring wine, laughing at her clumsy attempts to climb a dune, but the laughter never reached his eyes. When Clara suggested they cut the trip short, return to the city, his face went blank. Why? His voice was flat. I just thought, maybe a hotel, a pool. His smile returned, sharp and chilling. You're ungrateful. Do you know how much I've given to make this special? I didn't mean. He turned away, staring at the horizon where the sun began to dip. The silence between them was thick, suffocating. Clara felt the weight of isolation press against her, the vastness of the desert no longer beautiful, but imprisoning. That evening, she opened her travel diary, the one she carried everywhere. Hands trembling, she scribbled hurried lines. He frightens me. I don't know if I can trust him. If anything happens. The words trailed off, the ink smudged as her hand shook. When Rashid entered the tent, she snapped the diary shut, forcing a smile. Writing about the stars, he asked. His tone was light, but his eyes lingered on the notebook too long. Yes, she whispered. The stars. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, and extinguished the lantern. Darkness pressed in, heavier than before. Outside, the desert wind rose, carrying sand across the dunes like restless shadows. Clara lay awake, her heart pounding, sensing that the mask Rashid wore was slipping, and what lay beneath was far more dangerous than she had dared imagine. The desert morning broke pale and merciless, the dunes shimmering under heat that rose too quickly. By then, Clara was gone. 4 days later, a group of tourists riding camels stumbled across something half buried in the sand. At first, it looked like fabric, pale against the dune's slope. Then a scream split the air, startling the camels, and within hours the authorities arrived, sirens wailing through the emptiness. Clara's body lay curled as if the desert had tried to swallow her whole. Sand clung to her hair, her skin, her torn clothes. The coroner covered her with a sheet as the cameras began to click. News spread like fire. A European woman found dead in the desert, cause unknown. Companion questioned. At the camp, Rashid stood beside the fire pit, his arms folded, his face carved into grief. When officers approached, he spoke with steady calm, rehearsed sorrow in his tone. She wandered away, he explained. I begged her not to. She said she wanted to take pictures at sunrise. I fell asleep. When I woke, she hadn't returned. The words flowed easily, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of strain when pressed for details. Which direction did she go? The officer asked. Rashid hesitated. Toward the dunes. Did she take her phone? No. She left it behind. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. It didn't fit. The footprints near the camp didn't match Rashid's version, and Clara's belongings were scattered oddly inside the tent. Her diary lay open, a page torn. By evening, the camp swarmed with investigators, their boots crunching over sand, their gloves lifting evidence into sealed bags. The body was transported under a flurry of flashing lights, and the desert swallowed the silence again. The next day, headlines erupted. Romantic escape turns deadly. Clara's name flooded social media feeds back home, accompanied by filtered photos she had once posted, her smiling at cafes, her eyes bright with hope. Comment sections filled with strangers piecing together a narrative. Some called it an accident, others a warning. A girl chasing fantasies, meeting the wrong man. Rashid appeared on camera, dressed in black, his voice trembling. She was my guest, my beloved, he told reporters. Her death has destroyed me. His hands shook slightly as he spoke, but his gaze was sharp, measuring every angle. He knew how to look broken, how to win sympathy. Behind him, his family's influence pressed hard. Lawyers already preparing statements, shielding him from the whispers gathering like storm clouds. Still, inconsistencies gnawed at the investigation. The torn diary page was missing. Clara's phone contained half-written drafts of messages never sent. A tourist swore they had seen Rashid pacing near the dunes that morning, though he denied it. By the third night, the desert camp was abandoned, crime scene tape flapping in the wind. The fire pit was cold, the cushions scattered, the lanterns extinguished. What remained was a silence heavier than before, a silence filled with questions no one wanted to ask aloud. Somewhere, in an evidence locker, Clara's diary waited, its shaky words inked like a voice from the grave. And in the city across a narrow interrogation table, Rashid sat with folded hands, meeting the gaze of a woman who would not be swayed by charm. Detective Layla Haddad, whose arrival promised a shift the desert wind could not bury. Detective Layla Haddad sat across from Rashid, the fluorescent light buzzing faintly above them. The room smelled faintly of dust and old coffee. Rashid's suit was immaculate, his cufflinks gleaming, but his eyes betrayed sleeplessness. He leaned back, calm, as though this were merely an inconvenience. "You say she left before sunrise," Layla began, voice steady. "Yet the footprints near the camp belong only to you." Rashid's lips curved faintly. "Perhaps the wind erased hers. The desert does that, doesn't it?" Layla didn't flinch. She studied the way he avoided her gaze when she mentioned Clara's belongings, how his fingers tapped the table when silence stretched too long. He was performing, but she had spent years watching men like him try to control the narrative. That afternoon, Layla reviewed Clara's possessions, spread across an evidence table. Jewelry, a scarf, a half-empty perfume bottle, and the diary, its leather cover scuffed, its pages filled with slanted handwriting. She flipped through, the words pulling her into Clara's world. "He frightens me. I don't know if I can trust him." Her breath caught. It was a voice cut off mid-sentence, trembling on the page. But the next leaf had been torn away, jagged at the edge. She stared at the missing piece, her mind racing. Someone had wanted to silence Clara even in death. Later, Layla met with Clara's mother over a video call. The woman's face was drawn, her eyes swollen from crying. "She told me she was working," the mother whispered. "If I had known she was with him, I would have stopped her. I begged her not to trust strangers online." "She trusted him," Layla said softly, "and he betrayed that trust." The mother's sobs broke the connection into silence. Layla closed her eyes briefly, the weight of grief pressing hard against her chest. Back at the precinct, whispers circulated about Rashid's family, their power, their money, the quiet pressure already mounting to dismiss the case as an accident. But Layla refused to let it dissolve into sand. She gathered every inconsistency, Rashid's timeline, the missing diary page, the tourist's testimony of his pacing, the phone with unsent drafts. The pieces didn't yet form a clear picture, but they pointed to something darker than misfortune. Clara had tried to speak, even if only on paper. In the next interrogation, Layla leaned closer across the table. "You say you loved her," she murmured. "But love does not erase fear she wrote about you, Rashid. She left her truth behind." For the first time his composure cracked, the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth, a flash of anger in his eyes before he smoothed it away. "You can't prove anything," he said quietly. Layla let the silence hang, her gaze unwavering. "We'll see." As she left the room, the weight of Clara's diary pressed against her palm like a promise. It was not enough yet, but it was a beginning. And soon, in a courtroom heavy with cameras and voices, Rashid would be forced to face the words he could not bury. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with murmurs and the click of cameras. Reporters filled every bench, their pens poised, their lenses fixed on the man in the defendant's chair. Rashid al-Karim sat with perfect posture, dressed in an immaculate suit, his face sculpted into grief. At his side his lawyers whispered, their presence as polished as their clients'. Across the aisle, Clara's mother sat trembling, clutching a framed photo of her daughter. Her eyes were hollow, but her back remained straight. She would not let the world forget who Clara had been. Detective Layla Haddad took her place near the front, her file thick with evidence. She had spent sleepless nights building this case, knowing every detail mattered because Rashid's family influence pressed against her at every turn, powerful enough to bend the truth if she faltered. The prosecution opened with stark simplicity. Clara Jensen arrived in this country alive, full of hope. 4 days later, she was buried in a dune. The man she trusted most was the last to see her alive. Rashid's defense countered with practiced smoothness. "This was a tragic accident. The desert is unforgiving. Clara wandered too far. My client is guilty only of loving her." The trial became a battle of words, each side fighting to claim the narrative. Witnesses testified. The tourist who had seen Rashid pacing, the forensic expert who explained the strange placement of Clara's belongings, the officer who noted the missing diary page. Each detail chipped at Rashid's mask, though he remained calm, his gaze steady as if daring the jury to doubt him. Then Layla stepped forward with the diary. She placed it gently on the evidence table, its worn leather cover stark against the polished wood. The courtroom fell silent. She read aloud Clara's shaky handwriting. "He frightens me. I don't know if I can trust him." The words echoed in the chamber. Clara's voice carried through ink and paper. For the first time, Rashid shifted visibly, his jaw tightening. His lawyers objected, insisting the diary was private, subjective, but the judge allowed it. Clara's words remained in the record. The closing arguments drew the lines sharp. This was not an accident, the prosecutor declared. This was a pattern of control, of manipulation that ended in death. Clara Jensen's voice was silenced in the desert, but her diary speaks for her now. The defense leaned heavily on doubt. The desert erases evidence. There is no clear proof of foul play. My client is guilty of wealth, of being envied, but not of murder. When the jury withdrew, the room held its breath. Clara's mother clutched her daughter's photo so tightly the glass cracked under her grip. Layla sat rigid, her hands folded, refusing to let herself hope too strongly. Hours later, the verdict rang out. Guilty. Rashid's mask faltered at last, his face twisting in fury before his lawyers pulled him back. The gallery erupted, some in relief, others in protest. Clara's mother wept, her sobs filling the space with raw grief. Yet outside the courthouse, whispers spread quickly. Rumors of appeals, of money shifting hands, of power reaching farther than justice ever could. The conviction was real, but its permanence uncertain. That evening, Clara's mother stood alone on a balcony overlooking the desert. The horizon glowed with the last light of day, the dunes stretching endlessly, indifferent and vast. She held her daughter's photo close, her tears silent now. The truth had been spoken, but the cost was unbearable. And as the wind swept across the sand, carrying whispers into the night, it felt as though Clara's story was still not fully laid to rest.